The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has approved an increase in electricity tariffs for high-valued customers on Band A, who get up to 20 hours of electricity in urban centers across the country. Other customers will not be affected. NERC, that's the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, at a briefing in Abuja, said it approved the increment through power distribution companies DISCOs. A RISE correspondent Olije Wapera tells us more.
The Vice Chairman of the Market Competition Rates at the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, Musiliu Oseni, says the Commission approved the increment of the power distribution companies' DISCOs by pegging it at 225 naira of kilowatt per hour. But it says the new rate applies only to urban consumers in Band A who receive a minimum of 20 hours of power supply.
The Commission has approved a rate review of 225 naira per kilowatt hour for just under 15% of the customer population in NERC. So that means that less than 15% of the customers will be affected. And you recall the number, I am sure you are aware of the number of customers we have in NERC, and these are the customers that have been proven to be enjoying 20 hours average of supply.
The NERC says the customers in Band A represents only 15% of the 12 million electricity customers in the country. All other consumers are expected to pay the normal rate of 68 naira of kilowatts per hour.
Many of the customers, if that are classified as Band A customers, will not be affected. So I've told you that the Commission is leveraging on technology to ensure that we get access directly to the distribution system and get the data. As the data is being fed from the meters, the smart meters that have been installed on the feeders, we are getting in real time or near real time. We don't give the DISCOs the opportunity of any manipulation of data.
The regulator attributes the tariff increment to the cost of electricity generation, noting that the fluctuation in the exchange rate has continued to impact on the economy. As a result of this, consumers would have to pay more for investors to recover their operating costs.
The trend the Commission had going into January was maintain status quo will fund the subsidy. But I think the fiscal sustainability of the subsidy has become apparent to everybody. So in line with what other governments of the world do, government has just said, you know what, I cannot continue going at a rate of 240 a month. What I can cover now is something around half of that. So the Commission will continue to do the responsibility of designing the tariff calculation for what is cost effective. The government can determine at any point and say, this is how much I can afford the subsidy. The DISCOs will then have to adjust their own tariff design in a way that allows them to recover revenue that is required to make that happen.
The regulator also says the government cannot continue to bear the brunt of subsidizing electricity alone, but is, however, working on programs to close the metering gaps across the country. Olije Wapera, Arise News.
Joining us now on the morning show is Dr. Musiliu Oseni, Vice Chairman and Commissioner, Market Competition and Rates, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Good morning, Dr. Oseni, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Dr. Habati, and thank you for having me this morning.
Well, Dr. Oseni, so many questions to ask you. The justification for this, tariff increase within Band A is already well reported. 2022 was the last time there was a review of tariff regime. Government is spending too much money on subsidy. The cost of gas has gone up. The GENCOs are owing the companies money freed from subsidy can be used for developments in infrastructure, in other sectors of the economy. We have had all of that. But you were quoted as saying that it's only about 15% that will be affected. And that within the band, there are feeders that supply 20 hours of electricity in a day, about maybe less than 500. And that there's going to be an attempt by the NERC to make sure that discos do not exploit people. Now, do you have in NERC a mechanism in place to ensure that discos do not exploit people? How do you measure the places where 20 hours of electricity is supplied? Because even before this announced increment, people were already paying through their nose. Electricity has become a source of frustration for many families. In fact, the nation is in darkness. With what NERC has introduced now, in fact, some houses will never even switch on the lights. So how can you guarantee that there will be no exploitation, no abuse by the discos? Because I thought that was a major part of your submission yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abasi, for this question. And I think he's at the heart of everything. As I said yesterday, that the Commission has a number of mechanisms in place for monitoring the performance of the distribution companies. First and foremost, the distribution companies were directed some months back to install smart meters on their feeders. And on the basis of that, they get data being streamed into their data system. And initially, we developed an application protocol interface to extract the data from their system, to stream the data from their system into the Commission. When we realized that there are some challenges with that because sometimes the technology also fails. So we now mandated them to grant access directly to the Commission into their metadata management system, so that at least as they get the information, we are also getting it directly, we are able to get it directly. And as part of the system being put in place is the NERC has a call center that any customers that felt exploited can actually call. So the call center has been put in place to ensure that customers' complaints are addressed. And beyond that, as part of the mechanism leading to this particular review, we've set up a situation room comprising our staff, transmission company of Nigeria staff, because, of course, one thing that people say is that discos being the interface point between the sector and the customers, discos bear the brunt, sometimes even for something that may not be within their control, which probably if there is an issue with a transmission, for instance, or there is an issue with a generation. So we have a situation room comprising the disco staff, NERC staff, and transmission company of Nigeria staff, many of the feed officers, so that as issue emanate based on the reading of the smart meters that are already on the feeders, as well as any complaint that are coming in. And the issue of situation room is not new to the Commission. We did similar thing during COVID, where people had the opportunity of calling directly. In the next few days, the Commission will definitely also roll out the contact numbers of the situation room so that people that feel exploited or probably they have poor service delivery, especially starting with the 15% that are going to be affected by this review. Apart from that, the discos have also been mandated to set up a rapid response team within the clusters that will be affected by this review. And Dr. Abati, you mentioned the issue around, I think, more or less affordability, because you said many Nigerians are currently paying through their nose. But the truth of the matter is that the payments people complain largely about is because of no service that has led to backup generation. Because backup generation is more expensive than the grid generation. And for now, if you not guarantee minimum of 20 hours, these people will spend less on backup generation because diesel per kilowatt hour, using diesel to generate per kilowatt hour is at the rate of almost 600. If you use petrol, it's at the rate of around 300 plus. So if we now look at that, fixed guarantee hours of supply from the grid at 225 naira is still more, the net effects, if you do the net benefit analysis, is better for an individual that are affected by this to have grid supply than to invest in backup generation or use any alternative sources. So I think it is a question of will there be that supply? And the Commission is committed. And I think I retweeted yesterday that there are enforcement mechanisms in place. And the CEOs of the distribution companies are being asked, is it that you stand the heat or you leave the kitchen? We've moved from the era of Reform Act, which practically did not give the Commission the power to enforce much, to a new Electricity Act that has granted the Commission the power to enforce. I think I can stop here and listen to further questions.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Oseni, thank you so much for, I mean, you've been doing a lot of work clarifying issues, especially post the announcement of this hike in tariff. So some questions here with regards to Band A. So let's say for sake of argument, government wants to stop subsidizing those who can comfortably afford to pay for electricity and continue to subsidize for those who are most vulnerable, are unable, so the Band B to the rest of the bands, or Band A in your estimation. The first question, a number of people, especially in the Band A market, would be this conversation around supply of electricity of up to 20 hours. What's the reality of that? I know you've mentioned a number of times, guarantee, we will ensure, we have a responsibility. Why wasn't that done before the hike? Just to assure the people that indeed, because if you're saying that there would be guaranteed 20 hours of power supply, why wasn't this done? Why wasn't this guarantee already given before this announcement or this effecting of the increase, the hike in prices? Number two is the issue around metering. For Band A customers, have we been able to meet or to close the metering gap? Is there a guarantee? So that we also do away with the estimated billing, which, as had been mentioned earlier, could give room for abuse of the process by some discos, or by discos in this instance. So I understand the principle behind this hike, especially for those whom you've termed being comfortable enough to pay for the electricity that they consume. However, the question is that people are not even getting what it is that they are paying for. So why increase before sorting out the problem? Again, the third part of this would be the grid collapses. And I know you talk about the grid collapses. How are you going to address that issue if you're hiking rates for this band and ensuring that they get the amount of, the supply of power that they're paying for? There are so many issues belaboring this sector that hike increase does not seem to be the first thing that you should be addressing or should be addressed in this instance.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. I think first, the first one, why the increase before the improvement in quality of supply. I would say that, as I mentioned yesterday, the feeders that are going to be affected by this increase are the feeders that have been proven to have received average of 20 hours of supply per day. And of course, many people have said, oh, there are no feeders that have experienced 24 hours. And I do mention that we live in different locations. There are some people in some areas, Maitama, Asokoro, and a few other places that have experienced average of 20 hours of supply of electricity. Of course, it's not uniform. That is the reality of the matter. And that's why initially the number of feeders that were previously classified by the discos as Band A feeders are more than 1,000. They were around 1,100. So upon the review of the feeders that have actually been experiencing 20 hours of supply average, the only approved number of feeders by the Commission as of today is 481. DISCOs have the opportunity to provide compelling evidence, empirically backed up and verifiable, prior to the commissions approving any additional feeders to go into that. So there are feeders in some locations. In Nakpo, for instance, in Abuja here, there are a few feeders in Nakpo that have access to average of 24 hours of supply. In Nakpo, in the same area, you will also see some feeders that probably they have 8 hours. You will see some feeder maybe 4 hours and so on. It's not uniform, but we've done our own analysis to ensure that customers that do not have this level of service improvement are not affected by this rate review. And you talked about metering. The analysis has shown that the metering rate at band A service level is at highest compared to other feeders that are classified B to E. So currently, the analysis so far shown about 75 to 80% metering. It's not 100%, but the effort is ongoing to ensure that DISCOs quickly roll out meters to close the metering gaps in this particular band, especially to the affected customers. But in the meantime, because one thing is, even if today we put all the meters that are required on the table, it takes time to deploy. So the Commission currently have a capping order. And I believe you also reported recently when the Commission issued out an enforcement order for violation of capping order by the DISCOs, whereby they were asked to do credit adjustments, and also they are being also punished by deducting their FNA requirements. Some DISCOs have started. I can cite the example of Kaduna. Some DISCOs, because the rules allow them to file a petition against any order or regulations of the Commission. The rule allows the licensee that are affected to appeal to the Commission, which they did. We've conducted a hearing on that by a panel of 4 commissioners. In line with the extant rules, rulings will be made and communicated, and whatever the final rulings, they are bound to be, they are to abide by it. So that is that. On the issue of system collapse, I think it's important we understand factors that can potentially lead to system collapse. And on that basis also, I will speak specifically to some of the recent collapses we have. One of the factors that was, one factor that was responsible for this last one has to do with reduction in gas to one of the power plants. And also you have the issues of lack of maintenance by the generation companies. And the question is, what contributed to that? Both dip in supply of gas, as well as generation companies' inadequate maintenance. It boils down to money. Any investor will not invest when there is no path to recovery. For instance, the January generation invoice stood around 240 billion. So based on the tariff DISCOs current charged before yesterday, they can only be mandated to pay about 10% of that. That means that market will only do about 10% of the invoice. And how do you operate such a market and you expect a quality service? So those are part of the issues that we need to address. Of course, we can say government will subsidize, continue subsidizing, but investors are very sensitive. When the market they are entering is depending wholly or significantly on government intervention, investments will drag. So that's another reasons why this review is also necessary, to ensure that we begin to reset the market or reset the industry for the betterment of everybody. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's better for people to have power supply at 20 hours and above at the rate of 225 naira per kilowatt hour than having to spend 600 using diesel generator or spend about 350 or 300 plus using petrol fuel generator that will not even be able to take on your AC or freezers and so on and so forth. So I think this is important for us. It's a perspective we need to also look at. Thank you.
So, Mr. Oseni, Dr. Oseni, good to see you, my namesake. In your analysis,
yeah, thank you, sir.
Did you factor in the knock-on effect on inflation as regards this hike? Since most of this will be factories, will be companies. Did you do like a computational analysis of inflationary jump? And if you did, I'd like to see the empirical numbers, to that. Also, in running the data set,
okay,
no, I have another question. In running the data set analysis, that finally dropped, to about 480 feeders, what was the peer review mechanism? Because you said at first it was about 1,000 feeders, that are getting about that amount, but on your further analysis, you got about 480 feeders. What was the peer review mechanism at which it was looked at? Was it looked at in consonance with the discos and what they were supplying and all of that? Or it was just looked under the prism of, okay, this is what was supplied? Because, yes, you can supply to a feeder and it doesn't output and get to that location. You might have many factors like at first, what's the strength of my transformer? You can't be supplying to my feeder and my transformer might have been bad and I'm not getting it transformed into my own, house and things like that. So what was the end, line analysis that you did? And was it basically peer reviewed? And I also like to talk to you about, metering and metering threshold. What's going to be the quick enforcement on the meters? Now, will the messages be sent onto the meters, or is it going to be from the disco companies when, people buy and all of that? I'm talking about the kilowatt hour threshold now. How quickly is it going to be enforced because I hear with immediate effect. So has it started reading on those that have prepaid meters, for instance?
Okay, thank you so much. I think to your question on the knock-on effect on the inflation, I think first and foremost, in economics, when there is a policy, there will be positive side and some negative side. But what is important at the end of the day is the net effect. I think when you look at inflation, for instance, it's a combination of many things or prices of many products. You have a company relying on self-generation, for instance, buying gas, maybe buy diesel, for instance, at the rate of 1,500, 1,600, is going to factor in that price of diesel into it. But if you have a situation whereby the price of electricity goes up, but such an individual or company have to spend less on diesel, by the time you do the net effect analysis of it, there is most likely tendency that the impact will be better. That is, the individual will be better off for it compared to if it has to rely more significantly on diesel generator, for instance, or some companies using maybe CNG. I was at Agbara some weeks ago and listening to customers there talking about quality of supply and the need for them for going into backup generation and how they are feeling. CNG is expensive and so on and so forth. So I think it's important to put into that perspective. Of course, the first few months or first month, you may say, oh, maybe it's had maybe point something to inflation, but as improvement continues, definitely things will come to normalize. I need to put that way. So on the issue of feeders, transformers, I think you are, you are spot on. It's important, and I think it's fundamental and is at the heart of what we are doing. As I mentioned, at the 11 kV feeders, there are smart meters. In some distribution companies also, there are DT meters, but not all the distribution companies have that. I think Ikeja is leading in terms of DT metering for measuring the energy that goes into a locality. So what we are doing is that, of course, it's not going to be a 100% perfect situation. That is the truth of the matter, until all the customers are metered, because what you have talked about, the transformers also go into, is relevant to metering, which was your last question you mentioned. So it is quite important, because one thing is that we need to know is that, yes, we've set 20 hours of supply, which we are going to monitor. Then the other customers that are enjoying lower quality of supply, I think it's important I mention that if you enjoy, let's say, 5 hours of supply and you consume, let's say, 1 kilowatts, the cost of producing that 1 kilowatt is not different from somebody that enjoys 20 hours of supply and also consume, let's say, 1 kilowatt. But the person that enjoys low hours of supply, higher hours of supply, is going to pay more because the alternative generation is going to spend less or nothing on alternative generation. And I think that's one of the equity or fair regulation according to, based on the provision of the Act that the Commission has tried to put in place in coming all the way to this.
Dr. Oseni. Yes, please, 2 quick follow-up questions. We're just trying to manage time. Follow-up questions based on what you said. You talked about backup generation. You said when the grid collapses, you have backup generation, and that the reason we've been paying more. One newspaper is reporting this morning that, oh, Band A will pay 170,000 naira per month. Are you aware that in some neighborhoods, Band A customers pay as much as over 1 million naira per month for electricity generation in apartments that don't even have up to 4 ACs? So what is the guarantee that there will be no more backup generation with the grid collapsing all the time? A grid, a national grid that is centralized. And that's why the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises is saying that fundamental issues should be addressed first. Before NERC will say, oh, the last time we increased tariff was 2022. If that grid is still going to collapse, and there will be backup generation. So if you now say you have increased by close to 300%, are we going to be paying 3 million naira per month in order to have electricity? The entire country will be in darkness. So please explain this thing about backup generation. I hope you people will not come back and talk about it. That's number one. You also talked about metering. Okay. No, just wait. There are follow-up questions. You also said 75 to about 75% of persons in Band A have been metered. Metering is also a problem. That issue came up here. I saw you sidestepped it. Now, the people that don't have access to meter, that are victims of estimated billing, particularly people living in houses where there are facility managers who are looking for their own profits, who are looking for how to make money. NERC, what control do you have over this estimated billing? Because in those places, those facility managers will add their own on top, and they will ask you to come and pay 4 million naira. What you guys have done, is it not a prescription for chaos? By not, doing the right thing before coming to, we want to save money, we want to do this. Please, quickly. These are follow-up questions. I have other questions I could have asked you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Dr. Abazi. Quickly, I don't think I mentioned that people will use backup generator because there will be, grid collapse. What I explained is that when people don't have access to power, they use backup generation, and I used that analogy in the first question you asked. But I talked about the factors responsible for grid collapse. If there is no liquidity, it has serious implication on the quality of supply. So if you issued the invoice of 240 and expected the market to pay for just 10%, 24 billion, is a recipe for crisis. And that's one of the reasons that have been contributing to the recent grid collapses we have. Gencos not being able to pay for gas supply, not being able to maintain their machines as expected or as required is a recipe for poor quality of supply, grid collapse, and so on. It's part of the issues that we believe if the market is liquid enough, definitely will be addressed, following with enforcement. On the issue of metering, as I mentioned earlier on, the Commission currently have a capping order in place that cap the maximum amount a distribution company can charge an unmetered customers. And that also is empirically driven, the determination of it, I mean. So, and I mentioned that recently, the Commission issued an enforcement order to the discos, asking them to do credit adjustments for the customers that were deemed to have been overbilled above the caps. And I mentioned the case of Kaduna specifically. Kaduna has started. Some other discos, they file a petition which is based on the extant rules. Business rules of the Commission and also the Act allows for filing of petition against any decision of the Commission for reconsideration of any decision the Commission may have made. And the Commission has sat on that, have conducted the hearing, the rulings which should be issued to them, and the final decision, they are bound to adhere to it. As I mentioned that previously, enforcement action of the commissions were affected by the provision of the old Act. There were two sections of the old Act that provides for enforcement. One was enforcement relating to the terms and conditions of the license of the licensee. The maximum the Commission could charge legally could fine them. The maximum fine was 10,000 naira per day. The second one being a violation of regulation or order of the Commission. The maximum is just 10,000 naira only. Of course, we did some enforcement. We did 50 million, which were paid to Rural Electrification Fund and so on and so forth. But all those things were done. And if it was challenged, if all those things were challenged, probably the court would have reversed it. We have a case in 2018. We suspended the board of Ibadan Disco. We didn't sack them for emphasis sake. So they went to court because then we didn't have the power. Right. But recently we did more than that in Kaduna. We removed the board. They couldn't go to court because it's clearly stated the intervention the Commission can take based on the new Act. So enforcement action power of the Commission has improved, and definitely the Commission is committed to ensure that all the licensees, not only the discos, because discos are the interface, of course, but there are so many things that could happen to transmission or coming from the generators. So we are committed. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Oseni. Someone just sent a message and just wanted to highlight that because, you know, I mentioned the fact that some people who lived in your catchment areas of Band A might not be receiving up to even 10 hours of electricity per day, and already on their meter, it has increased. So this is from Jikoyi in Abuja under AEDC. They received an increase in tariff, but they don't receive up to 10 hours of electricity per day. So just to fine tune those things so that people who are not in Band A would know, because he charged his, he showed me evidence of charging his meter and already it's been deducted and it's the new rate that applies, yet they don't get up to 20 hours. Well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Dr. Oseni, and we hope to have further engagement and more information from your office with regards to the implementation.